Hello and welcome to TWWork, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing people, the fantastic jobs they do and the paths that led them to where they are today. I'm here with Cara. Hi Cara.
Hi.
Could you tell the listener what it is you do for a living?
I am a graphic recorder, business illustrator and trainer.
I mean, it's so utterly unique. People are going to listen to that and go, what earth does that mean? So we will come into that. But before we do that, we always track back and we talk about little Cara. Mm-hmm. So what were you like when you were younger? What were you into?
I was a child of the 70s.
Yeah.
In a working class family with two working parents. So that meant, I guess, we were quite hands-off in the world of parenting in those days.
Yeah.
And therefore, my memories are of quite a lot of time just independently
Bit of freedom
playing.
and
yes. So I had a very good imagination. So I had a lot of imaginary worlds that I lived in and just a lot of sort of time being a bit feral, really. Just
Brilliant.
roaming the estate and building
Running the
dens.
streets unchecked.
Yeah.
But in fairness, it did almost feel a lot more innocent back then, though, didn't it?
Yes, definitely. Oh,
Whereas now-
pre-computers, pre the internet, pre-social media. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems blissful.
The world feels incredibly predatory right now, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, any siblings?
One brother, slightly older.
Okay. So, what school then? What were you like? Did you like school?
I would say when I was very little, I did. And then I became a teenager and I didn't. And I was a moody goth kind of kid in the 80s and didn't get on at secondary school. Was always just missing the point, I think.
Didn't feel like you quite fitted. It felt different, that kind of thing.
It definitely wasn't a good fit for me.
Yeah.
So I was always in a lot of... it felt like I was in a lot of trouble. So left school at 16, went and did a BTEC. And I went and did a BTEC in another place. So boarded, went and moved into halls.
Yeah.
Which suited me. And then obviously I hadn't really...
So this is like a uni though, isn't it? It's like...
Well, sort of, but for 16 to 18-year-olds.
Oh, okay.
So there was quite a lot of forces kids there and that kind of...
Wow.
So yes.
How did you even find that out?
I found it out because a girl in my village who was a goth went, and she used to get the bus there,
which is what I was saying earlier. You don't know what you don't know, do you?
Don't.
You've got to come across the right people.
And so she used to get the bus there every day, and I was very keen to leave home.
Yeah.
And so it suited me to not. And fortunately, my parents were obviously also happy for me to leave. So I had equally lots of run-ins at the college, but managed to get to the end of it. So that's something. And didn't go to university. So then moved to Nottingham because it had a really good club scene.
It did,
and I knew...
so is this now the early 90s?
So then? This is late 80s. So I was 18...
Yeah.
So 18-9.
Yeah.
So moved to Nottingham because there'd been some...
So you literally moved there for the club scene?
I moved there for Rock City, absolutely.
Wow.
And I'd met some psychobilly girls in London, and one of them lived in Nottingham, and she had a room spare in the house she lived in. So I moved up and rented that room, and that was that.
But with what? What did you do for work, though?
So when I told my mum I wanted to move to Nottingham, she said, that's fine, as long as you've got £200, you can go. So I got a job in a picture shop, framing pictures, and saved... I'd always worked, I always had a waitressing job, but I got a full-time job.
Yeah.
Worked for a few months, saved £200, moved to Nottingham with £200, didn't have a job, had obviously to pay rent and bills and food. And then I found a picture shop that sold, framed artwork. And I wanted to work in the arts.
Yeah.
Like I loved art at school, did an art and design BTEC, but hadn't gone to university, and working in a picture shop seemed like the nearest I might get.
Yes, yeah.
And they had an interior design section to this shop where they framed pictures. So I rang up and said, look, I want to apply for this part-time job in your shop, but I can also frame pictures. And so they hired me.
Brilliant.
And so that was my first
So
job
how long
in
had you been in
Nottingham.
Nottingham, do you think?
It can't have been long because 200 quid doesn't last long.
Well, no, I was
even
gonna
in the
say.
80s. And I think my rent was like 100 quid. And
Yeah.
so I was down to my last pounds.
But actually, that just sounded like you've... I know it probably didn't seem like at the time, sort of landed on your feet, but you say that sounded like a great fit for where you were at the time.
I guess, yes. Yeah. I was certainly very grateful for it because it meant I could stay.
Yeah.
And so I worked there for 3, maybe less, 2 years. And so half the week I'd be in the shop, half the week I would be in the factory pitch framing.
Yeah.
And after about 2 years, I realised that working in a shop for the rest of my days probably wasn't where my ambitions lied.
Yeah.
And that I probably wanted something that had some kind of potential. But I didn't know what that meant, and I had these very hands-off parents, so there was nobody really to ask. I lived with other, 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
I was very much sort of making all of these decisions by myself. And I'd been saving some money because I thought I was going to go to Australia for a year, and you had to save, I want to say it was £2,000 back then to go to Australia and get the visa for a year. And the month before I was going, I thought I might never have £2,000 again. This is a lot of money. I could use it to go part-time and live on it and instead go and do a course that could lead me to something new. So very practical and serious-minded, I guess, for my age. And because I didn't know what I was going to do, I wrote a pros and cons kind of list. And I remember doing it, and so I literally got an A4 piece of paper and I wrote a list of all the things I liked without any kind of thoughts about what kind of job might that be.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be in an office every day. I didn't want to be on my own. Like, I liked people.
Wow, yeah.
I liked things that were creative. So I wrote this big list of what do I like.
Yeah.
And then in my second column, I tried to figure out, well, what on earth kind of job would that be?
Yeah.
And I came up with social worker. And I thought, all right, well, that fits. I didn't know any social workers, but that fits.
Wow.
I'll do that. And so I used my savings to live on for a year and went and did like an access to social work course.
Okay.
So this was when I was 20. So I spent a year at like a little local college doing an access course, thinking that at the end of it I would be a social worker.
Yeah.
And I sort of, back in the day, one of the things that they particularly looked for in social workers, which I didn't know because I didn't know any, was life experience and sort of a maturity in order to be able to carry out that role in people, people's homes and lives that were facing some challenges. And so when I got to the end of my access year, I went for an interview for university to train to be a social worker. And I didn't get it. And I remember thinking, oh, shit, I've backed the wrong horse kind of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a job came up in a hostel for homeless teenage women who were either pregnant or had a child.
Wow.
And I applied for that job and got it.
Because you've got this year of, I guess,
got this year of experience. And so I got that job at
And this is in Nottingham.
21
still.
in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And that was sort of, I guess, the beginning of that next phase of my
Wow.
career, which lasted probably the next 15 years, I guess, in one form or another. So I went from being a supervisor in a hostel to I applied for a job as a development worker for a charity working with young carers. And it was a reasonably new charity, and the young carers arm of it didn't exist, and my job was to go and develop it.
Wow.
And I got that job, so I became then a manager.
Yeah.
I had, a little team and got to create new things and be developmental. And
were you doing, so your art, were you doing stuff in your own time, or had you kind of parked that for a while?
I'd sort of parked it, apart from when I look back with that kind of eye of reflection.
Yeah.
I can see that when I worked in the picture shop, I would be the person who would do the window display. So I would create big cutout, creations to surround the pictures and be creative in that way. And when I worked in the hostel, I ran a little a social drawing club in order to help people de-stress.
Yeah.
And we would do arts and crafts together.
Yeah.
And we would draw. Part of being in the hostel was obviously to get ready for independent living. So we would draw, what do you want your new house to be like, or your flat?
Interesting.
So those kinds of using drawing and art, I was still doing. And then when I worked for the charity as the development worker, I was there for nearly 10 years. And in that time, my team grew. So I ended up with, I don't know, maybe a team of about 8 people, I guess. And we would have an away day every year where we would all contribute something. We would look at how we'd done the last year. We'd plan our next year. And one year I got everybody to draw what they wanted to happen. And we drew it onto a big long piece of wallpaper, like the back of a bit of wallpaper. And at the end of that, and everybody, most people are quite anxious about drawing. Most people who don't like drawing, they've had bad experiences, they think they can't draw. So people sort of protested a bit, but everybody contributed and got into it. And when we had finished that annual plan, people, the team, chose to put it up on the wall because it was this big roll of paper. It wouldn't go in a file. You couldn't put it in a filing cabinet. And it went up on the wall, and I realised that over the coming weeks and months, it stayed up on the wall and people would refer to it. And by the end of the year, we'd done everything on the plan, which felt like a revelation. So that felt like, for me, a bit of a light bulb moment. However, I then decided I was a bit bored in my job, so I went travelling. I took a year's sabbatical.
So you did what you were maybe thinking of with Australia.
Yes.
You finally did.
Yeah, so I did that.
What are you now, like late 20s or?
Yes, so that was probably about 29.
Yeah.
And I guess it's probably worth adding that in the couple of years before that, I did my degree at night school because I hadn't gone to university. So work funded me to do an Open University course. So I did my degree. I got my social work qualification. So in the previous years, I'd sort of done all the things, all the progressing that I felt I'd missed.
Yeah.
And I guess what I hadn't done was fulfill that bit where, I got to go and see the world. And so I took a year off, and work was very good and supported me, kept my job.
Did they?
They did.
So they basically gave you a sabbatical?
Yeah, so I had a year off. And then I came home and I picked up my job and I walked back into my flat and I just thought, oh no, this isn't right. Nothing's changed. It was like walking back into a still of a picture that you'd just left the day before. So it was very surreal to come back.
Yeah, but yet you felt really different.
Yes, so it's like all of these
Everything
things
was
have
the
happened.
same.
But everything is entirely stood still. Obviously
Yeah.
it hadn't, but that's what it felt like. And so I only stayed a few more months in my job. I realised I needed to move jobs. And so I did. Where did I go then? Oh, so then I went from there, went from the charity to the Students' Union. And it was, in some ways, a very good fit because I found it quite easy.
Right.
And I found finding a job quite easy, quite disturbing.
Oh, okay. You wanted a challenge.
Yeah, I
there.
did. And the campus at Nottingham is beautiful, and it's very it's quite a old school university, so it has lakes, and my office had beautiful big Georgian windows, and I was next to the lake, and and it just felt surreal to be going there every day, and I think my feet were too itchy to think this was a good fit.
Yeah.
So I only stayed a year.
That's all right. That's more than a lot of young people now. They'll give a job like 6 months now, max, won't they, before they move on? So.
Yeah, so I stayed a year and I was just bored, really, I think. Like, it was nice enough, but I think I didn't want nice. And so I went and got a job at another charity that I was the deputy manager of a national charities Nottingham branch. And so that meant I was back working with managing teams, working with marginalised or children and young people who were facing different challenges.
Yeah.
And mainly they were kind of health-based challenges. So children who were in palliative care or who were in hospital or various things. So I managed a variety of teams.
Yeah.
And in that job, I came across a world of work that was new to me, which was around person-centred planning with children who have additional needs.
Oh.
And that is, if you're not familiar with it, is a series of tools and methods of centering a person in their own social care world so that they're part of and centred to decisions being made that affect them.
Wow, okay.
And it uses visual tools to do that had been sort of pioneered, I want to say maybe I'm speaking now just off the top of my head, but I want to say in perhaps the late 70s.
Yeah.
In either Canada or the US.
I was going to say Canada. I feel like we need to connect the dots there somehow.
And I came across that, and that felt like a little bit of
You came across that because they'd asked you to do it, or because you came across it?
I came across it in a sort of an accidental way. I was doing some work in a school for children with additional needs, and somebody
just referenced it or something. Yeah,
and it made me curious.
Yeah.
And at the same time, somebody who was an educational psychologist who came on secondment to the organisation I worked in. And she was more experienced with this because educational psychologists use some of these tools.
Right.
And she told me about a conference that was coming up. And so I went to this conference, and a guy called Jack Pierpont, who was one of the pioneers, was at this conference, and he agreed for anybody who was interested and wanted to stay behind, to train them in how to use this particular tool.
Wow.
So me and another person stayed behind, and Jack Pierpont, who was this pioneer, trained me how to use this particular method, which uses drawing to create a big picture, really, of somebody's needs and wants.
And their circumstances.
And then looks at how you might get them to where they want to be.
Right.
So it's very practical.
So is it like it's a visual template. Representation of their life now?
So it's a bit of what are your dreams? So what are you dreaming?
Okay. So
let's get that on paper.
Right.
What do you want?
Yeah.
And how are we going to get you from here to there?
Yeah.
And so that body of work had been going on in the States for a couple of decades. And also this person-centered planning world, which was different, had been going on since a similar kind of time period. And both of those two things together really interested me. It's like, well, how can I bring visual tools into the meetings I have to run with my teams or with other people? How can I make them more visual, and will that make them more effective? And so I started to shoehorn working visually in a targeted way into all my jobs. Yeah. And it did work, and I did like it. And one of the things I did as part of my job was train other teams in. So, for example, I went and worked with an area's youth service who were having some team challenges. Yes. And to run a day on how can we, get past these challenges.
Team building, all that kind of stuff, yeah.
And so I did that training, ran that day using a big visual template that I'd created. And obviously it was effective because people love that stuff. Yeah. And our board of meetings as we traditionally have them and know them. And a few months later, I bumped into the manager of that area team in town. I was just out shopping. And he said, would you come and deliver some more training for us like that? Because we're still talking about it and we've still got the picture up. And I thought, okay, I'm going to see that as a door opening. Yeah. And not only am I going to say yes, but I'm going to go home and set up my own business. And I'm going to, so that.
Whilst you still had your full-time job. Yeah.
So I went home and registered a business.
Wow.
Said yes to this guy that I'd go and deliver the training. And then I went to work and had a meeting with my boss and said, look, I'm doing this. And this, I don't see this as part of my role, so I want to put a bit in my contract or I want it minuted that this is distinct. Yeah. That you don't own this part of me.
Well done.
And then I went part-time. So
they still supported you then.
For sure. Yeah. So I went part-time, and so then I had a year, nearly, a bit less, where I was starting my new business and working part-time in my current role. And
was the business quite word of mouth at that point as well? You're almost getting recommended and referred and things.
Yeah.
And it's in the same sort of sectors as well at that point.
So pretty much entirely, I think, in those first few months, it was people who knew, that kind of network.
Yeah.
And after a few months, I started to get some big clients contact me. And this was 20 years ago. And so it's still an area of work that people haven't heard of. Yeah. So 20 years ago, it was very, very niche. And so I benefited very much from that because there weren't many people doing it in the UK.
But yet there was this start of this growing interest for doing things a little bit more alternatively, wasn't there? And effectively, I say getting being effective.
And people wanted to be creative. People wanted their meetings to stand out, and they wanted their work to be different. And so I got quite early on, after only a few months, some big clients like Google and Microsoft and Time Warner.
Just suddenly drop that in. How did you get them?
They just emailed me and said, will you come and do this thing?
But there was no social media.
I know.
So you weren't even... How did they know about you?
I mean, I had a little website that I made myself. I had one page website that I made.
If anyone's going to find you, then Google should be able to find you.
It's true. And I think for me, that was very lucky. A lot of luck involved in that there wasn't a lot of competition. So I was findable if somebody looked.
Yeah.
And I managed to get some big name clients very early.
That's not big names. That's like tech giant names.
Yeah.
You're being very humble about this, but anyway, I'll let you carry on.
And that led to the net. So once you can put, as you know, once you can put some fancy names on your website, it's a kind of social proof that leads to other jobs.
Yeah.
And so
everybody wants to be like Google and let me see on into Microsoft. So
since that time, which is sort of the first year of my business, I really I haven't really looked back from there. So I gave up my job to focus on the business.
After what, like a year then?
A bit less than a year, yeah. And so I was very lucky in as much as I've never had to advertise, because the work spreads by itself.
Yeah.
And is its own advert. And every job led to another job, almost without fail. So every time I turned up and drew at somebody's...
Well, because companies want to show off.
For sure.
What they're doing, don't they? Oh, look how good we are with helping our employees. It's just...
Yeah.
By very definition, they're going to show off by showing you off, aren't they?
Yeah. So that all worked out brilliantly. And I was very much learning as I went. I really didn't have a clue.
And adapting and tweaking it probably.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And getting a sense of what were the types of things companies would find useful, and could I offer that? So expanding what it was I did.
So give us some examples then of what it could be then or now of what you were going in and doing then. So what you might run like a half-day session or a whole day session.
In the early days, the first few kinds of jobs that I can remember. So the first job was, can I go back and deliver a new training session using the visual kind of template method? So yes, I could.
So you have to rock up there with all your drawing equipment, paper, everything,
big
all the
roll of
tools
paper
you want
and
to use.
A bucket of marker pens.
Yeah, and you've got a plan, and you've got a plan for how the session would work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because I was from that sector of that very first job, I was very good at delivering and creating training in those topics. So I wasn't dropping into a world I didn't have, knowledge of.
Yeah.
And so that was the first job. The second job was a national youth agency who had a model of work that they wanted to share. And it was, a page of text. This is how they worked. And I had met the guy who was in charge of this department at a conference in my paid job. And he asked me if I could visualise this page of words. So could I make their method visual in order to make it more understandable?
Without involvement from them, you were doing that.
Yes.
So that's So there's one being there with a group of people.
Yes, one delivering, facilitating,
and one just almost getting a brief and doing
exactly.
Back.
So obviously I said yes, and so did that. And then the next job was to go to a community consultation event. And so they're looking at developing services in an area, and this was again a youth service connected kind of environment. Yeah. And they had invited all of the youth from this estate to this evening to get their views.
Ooh.
And so I had a big piece of paper up on the wall.
Cool, then.
And my task was to talk to the young people, find out what they thought, and draw it. So I did that. So that was 3 kind of different ways of working very quickly.
You drew it there and then?
Yes. So it's very much live drawing is what I do mainly.
Yeah.
And so I'd done facilitating using visual tools that I'd created. I'd done graphic recording, which is drawing while people are talking. And some graphic illustration, which is taking people's content and turning it into a picture. So I got to do those 3 things really. They were my first 3 jobs.
Okay, I've got to know what Google was. What was the first job you did for?
First job I did for Google was an event around. Do you remember? I don't even know if they became something. They probably did, didn't they? Google Glasses,
Oh yeah, no, did they though, or did they get? God, there was a lot of hype about them though, wasn't there? I think that maybe there was some, because as you're saying that, I can picture like Will.i.am or someone walking around with them on. But I don't think were they too expensive maybe?
Well, I don't know, because the meeting I was at the prototyping stage. So there was like some cardboard ones made out. It was all anyway. I got invited to that meeting, and then I would draw the meeting. Did you have to
sign your NDA life away?
Do you know what? No.
Didn't you?
No, but I am the height, having been a social worker, I'm the height of discretion. So
well, quite.
I do never draw and tell.
No.
But yes.
That you need that as a t-shirt, you know.
Yeah. So that was a
So you just, in that issue, drew the meeting, did you? You visualised the meeting, okay.
Then the first Microsoft one was like a celebration event.
Yeah.
So like an evening do. I just stand in the corner and draw what's happening.
Brilliant.
Time Warner, they were like a talent meeting around talent retention. And so that was like all the global heads of talent came to London and had a meeting, and I just get to sit there and draw that.
Draw it.
Yeah. So lots of meetings.
Did you feel really cool at the time?
I think it was quite surreal. Yeah, it was just a very, I felt very free. Because I think, like I don't...
Well, and autonomous. You were literally in control and charge of your own life.
Yeah, so I'd had like a couple of decades of working full time already, even in my early 30s.
Yeah.
And so, to suddenly be travelling, like being paid to fly to other countries and things. I know. So it was all a little bit weird and surreal.
It's brilliant,
and so those first years were really good because the work just kept landing in my inbox, and the clients were generally fancy, which meant they paid well. Yeah. And they put you up in nice hotels, and you got to go to good venues, and you got to hear really interesting things.
I was going to say.
So you're in...
If only you did draw and tell.
I know, right?
Stuff the
book I could write.
I know. The book you could draw.
The book I could draw. The comic I could draw. So I got to go to a lot of interesting conversations, which really floated my boat. So the people that hired, maybe less so now, certainly back then, the people that hired you were generally something where it was quite senior people, because it was an expense and it was a luxury and a nice to have. It wasn't essential. And so I got to sit in, board level meetings of big organisations talking about future strategy, or, the next PlayStation, and sit with their development team those kind of things are fascinating. Like when those, So that was really good.
Have you ever signed an NDA?
Yes.
Damn it.
Yeah. I have, several, but not as many as you would think. Mm. So very early on, I decided I wanted to train other people to do what I do. And so I started to run training courses by about the middle of the second year of me doing it. So sort of 2008 maybe.
Well, I guess it's smart as well, because there's only so much you can do.
Mm. Yeah.
So actually, if you can earn income by helping other people to pick up, that's a smart move. So I
did that as just one of the things I did was run these training courses. And I started off running in-person training courses. They were 2-day courses twice a year.
Was it group courses then, or one-to-one? Or?
It was small groups, I think it was a maximum of 10 people. Yeah. After a few years of doing it in that way, I decided to take it online, which was sort of, for me, again, another whole sort of new world.
But when are we?
It's a really good question.
Because I was going to say,
I would love to say I knew.
Was even YouTube a thing at this point?
Facebook was the first one.
Right.
Facebook
so this kind of
group.
predates YouTube then.
So I had some locked pages on my website, which were the course content. Yeah. and then a Facebook group to give feedback, and which was sort of, it was fine. It was, a start. And I'm not remotely technical. My wife is much more technical.
Yeah.
So she was able to build in 2018 a training platform of our own.
Not even on YouTube, just a completely bespoke. Wow.
And so we'd gone from having the Facebook courses to a Squarespace course.
Yes.
To then...
a bespoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was 2018.
Yeah.
So the training bit became a much bigger part of the business then. I mean, to date, I think we've trained people in like 92 countries. So it's got the ability to spread far.
Yeah.
We're able to train, big corporate groups. Like we did a big training for IBM where we trained like several hundred people at once. But also run these very small group in a similar style to the face-to-face ones, small group cohorts where they get all the work is individual feedback from me. So it's very sort of hands-on.
Yes.
And so now I do... about half my time is the training and the online academy. And then half my time is split between graphic recording, so live events and meetings, and graphic illustration, taking people's documents or contents or reports and turning them into rich pictures.
So what next then?
Oh, you see, next, we've got retirement in our sights. So in the next 10 years...
So do as much as you can and then...
Yeah, well, more. I don't know if it's do as much as we can. We sort of are scaling back.
Ooh, okay.
So I think it's... And by that, I mean we're being more choosy. So I definitely say no to jobs now, which I didn't used to. And
Right.
I definitely think, do I really want to either travel that far or be in that topic for a couple of days? Or I definitely am more selective and choose more jobs that really make me happy. Futurism really interests me, and I've been lucky enough to draw a lot of futurists, sort of future predictions.
Really?
And I find that really interesting.
At a corporate level?
Yes. Yeah, they're quite popular speakers, keynote speakers, to bring somebody in and say, what's the future of travel? What's the future of... Yeah. So that I find really interesting, and I think the beauty of what I do, not what I do, the beauty of what I get to do is I get to work across different sectors. So I can be listening to a futurist talking about power, as in, fossil fuels. And,
versus...
And then I can hear somebody talking about the future of farming, and then I can be in a meeting talking about the future of, I don't know, the infrastructure of the UK And so what I would say to people who are remotely curious about working visually is that you absolutely can do it I can't think of a job where you couldn't work visually in some way and it'd be helpful. And whether that's in running a meeting or trying to solve a problem or trying to design a system, if you draw it, you can see it and everybody can see the same thing. Yeah. Whereas if you're just having a conversation, everybody is interpreting that differently.
Completely.
And that's...
I'm going to ask you my 3 final questions.
Okay.
Which are, is there any advice you would give your younger self? So younger, Cara, what would you say? Could be any version of yourself, getting into trouble, feeling a bit lost, whatever it is.
I would say probably 2 things. So one would be, I recognised quite young that I wasn't good enough. I say that I know that's a loaded term. I don't particularly mean that in a judgy way. I wasn't good enough to be an artist. Whereas there are many ways to use your artistic skills and passions in jobs that you don't know exist. So one of which is being a graphic recorder. Yeah. So my advice would be, don't sideline your art just because you're not that 0.01% of people who are gifted artists.
And let's hang in there.
And hang in there. But also, I wish that when I was in that stage of my life where I thought, okay, I'm not going to be an artist, instead I'm going to be a social worker. I sort of sidelined myself, that I had just kept up an artistic practice. I'd kept a visual journal.
Right.
I had built a body of work just for my own pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Question 2 is always, what life advice or advice do you think your older self would give you now? So like 75-year-old Cara, what would she say to you now?
I think 75-year-old Cara would say, worry less, do what makes you happy, and, find a way to make that work, what makes you happy.
But you're doing that, aren't you?
Oh, for sure.
And this may be the answer to the final question as well then, is just a mantra or some life advice that you live and die by that you want to impart on the world.
I would say...
Other than don't draw and tell.
Give it a go. Give it a go. If somebody, if you see an opportunity, just say yes.
Well, and also be open to opportunities, because you've got to have your eyes and your mind open quite clearly. If there's one thing I've got from this, or there's a lot of things I've got from this chat, it's that. It's try and just be receptive to opportunities that might just appear from literally nowhere.
Yeah. I think just say yes more.
Yeah.
Worry less. Pursue happiness.
Yeah. It's brilliant advice. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
If you would like to hear more about this chat, see some pics and read about how to get started in this industry and or this role, then please go to our website www.TWWork.org. The link is in this podcast page and across our socials. Sincere thanks.